This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
It's really a great kavod to be in this Chashav Moisad, B'Shus Rosh Shiva, and B'Shus Avi Meiri. I have to say, I did want to come see for myself. I did hear a lot about you. That's Now, I got a little nervous when I started because my recorder is full. But Baruch Hashem, it looks like there are enough recordings over here on the desk. Every day you have the zchus to come to this yeshiva k'dosha. And of course, you spend yomim v'leilos immersed in limud Torah. And sometimes it's kedai, it's worthwhile to stop for a moment and to really identify and try to understand, what am I accomplishing by limud Torah? What does it do for me? What does it do for the world? What does it do for Klal Yisrael? And I think you'd be surprised to understand the effect that Torah has not just on the whole world, not just on Klal Yisrael, but the effect that Torah has on you. There's an amazing Gemara. They say that Reb Chaim Kanievsky, everybody knows, Reb Chaim would finish Kol HaTorah Kula every year. But the Chazon Ish said that the Shagas Aryeh could chazer the entire Shas in 30 minutes. What does that mean? It doesn't mean he said every word of Shas. It's that the Yesoidos of Shas could be reviewed and crystallized in 30 minutes. But the Gemara tells us about somebody by the name of Rav Sheshes, an Amoira. Rav Sheshes would finish the entire Talmud every 30 days. When he finished the Torah after 30 days, the Gemara says in Psachim, he would go up to the top of a boat and he would talk to himself. He would say, Chadoi nafshoi, Chadoi nafshoi. He would say, rejoice my soul, rejoice my soul. He would talk to himself. He would, so to speak, give himself a pat on the back. Say, good going. Yasher koyach, he would say to himself. But he would continue his conversation. He would say, L'cha karoi, I learned Chumash for you. L'cha tanoi, I learned Mishnah for you. I do it for myself. I did something good for myself. So Gemara asks right away, what? You're supposed to learn for yourself? Isn't a person supposed to learn to hold up the whole world? Don't Chazal say, we know that Reb Chaim Volozhiner said the reason the Rebbeinu Shalom created time zones is because this way, every moment of the day, somebody is learning Torah. If the learning of Torah would cease for one moment, the world could no longer exist. So why is Rav Sheshes saying that he learns for himself? Aren't you supposed to learn to uphold the whole world? There's amazing Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer says in Torah Moshe, there's one Yom Tov a year that have 2 different days. It depends where you live. So if you live in an open city, it's Yadar. You live in a walled city, it's Tesvav. How could such a thing be? The Ramban in the very beginning of Masechta Megillah asks, the Ramban says, what do you mean? Torah achas u'mishpar echad yi'alachem. By Kol HaTorah Kula, everyone keeps the entire Torah, exact same Torah. Why by Purim do we have different days? Says Chassam Sofer Pashat. You know and I know that on Purim, not everybody is sitting in the Beis Medrash learning Yom V'Layla. So there's a danger that if all of Klal Yisrael would have the same Purim, then maybe there would be a moment in time that there's no Limud Torah. So Chazal were koveya 2 different days of Purim. So Torah upholds the whole world. The sun couldn't exist without Torah. The moon, the stars, the oceans, everything would just cease existing if Torah would stop for a moment. So Rav Sheshes should have learned to hold up the whole world. Says the Gemara, no. Meikara. Ki avid inish adaitoi denavshe ka'avid. Meikara. How do you touch meikara? Literally meikara means in the beginning. Ki avid inish, when a person learns, adaitoi denavshe ka'avid, he should learn for himself. In the beginning, when you learn, you should learn for yourself. The problem is, that's very nice if you're a beginner. But we're talking about Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes was not a beginner. Rav Sheshes did this for 30 days. Every 30 days he did this. Every 30 days, Rav Sheshes said, Chadoi nafshoi, chadoi nafshoi. What does the Gemara mean in the beginning when a person learns? They should learn for themselves. So there's an amazing goyin that everybody needs to know. The goyin is an Adaras Eliyahu. The goyin is mechadesh. Maybe you know the general idea, but the goyin says a chidush nifla. The goyin says there are 3 categories of mitzvahs. We're all familiar. There are 2 categories of mitzvahs. There's bein adam la'makom, bein adam la'chaverai. And there's a big debate, which is more important. Could you say one is more important than the other? The right side of the luchais, the left side of the luchais. The goyin is mechadesh. There are 3 categories of mitzvahs. There's bein adam la'makom, tefillah. When you daven, it's between you and the Ribono Shel Olam. Sometimes people get very friendly when it comes to davening. You could be friendly any other time. You want to be mekabos kol adam b'sever panim yafos. You want to do chesed, good. Not bisman tefillah. Tefillah bein adam la'makom. Then there's bein adam l'chaveroi. There's gemilas chasadim. That's between you and your friend, between you and your chaver. Says the goyin, there's a 3rd category of mitzvah. It's not bein adam la'makom. It's not between you and the Ribono Shel Olam. It's not bein adam chaveroi. It's not between you and your friend. The goyin says bein adam la'atzmai. It's between you and yourself. Says the goyin, Talmud Torah bein adam la'atzmai. As the Gemara says, me'ikara ki ovid inish adaita denavshe ka'ovid. What does the goyin mean? Like the Gemara says, me'ikara ki ovid inish adaita denavshe. How is Talmud Torah bein adam la'atzmai? Bein adam la'atzmai. You're learning to yourself. You're teaching yourself. How is Torah bein adam la'atzmai? So I want to share with you a very pashut Mishnah. Everybody knows the Mishnah. The tour even begins, Torah Arachaim, with this Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Yehuda ben Tema omer, Havi az kanomer, V'kal kanesher, Rotz katzvi, V'gibar ka'ari lasois ritzoin avicha shabashamayim. Does that Mishnah mean anything to you? I want to ask you a personal question. Does this Mishnah mean anything to you? Imagine you're going to yeshiva, and the Rebbe says, come on, let's go already. Well, you're walking like an otzel. That's how you walk to yeshiva? Put a move on it. Say, Rebbe, I'm going 20 miles an hour. No! Have a rotz katzvi. You should go 50 miles an hour, like a deer. What do you mean, like, I'm not a deer? I'm a human being. What do you mean, have a rotz katzvi? Is that a meaningful comment? Be swift. Imagine somebody said, fly like a rocket ship. Shkoyach. That's a very meaningful comment. Fly like a rocket. I'm not a rocket ship. I'm a person. I'm not a deer. I'm not a lion. I'm not an eagle. No, you're doing the mitzvah. Don't be embarrassed. Be like a leopard. What's that supposed to mean? That means something? That has any meaning? That resonates with you? Do you remember Rashi at the end of the Torah? Moshe Rabbeinu tells Klal Yisrael, Ha'idoisi bachem hayoim es hashamayim v'es ha'aretz. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I call to testimony heaven and earth. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, you're not going to keep the mitzvahs every single day? What are you going to do? You're going to say, today I'm going to keep the mitzvahs, tomorrow I'm not going to keep the mitzvahs? Look at the sun. The sun rises every single day. So be like the sun. Shkoyach, be like the sun. That means something? We mean be like the sun. The sun is programmed. The Rebbe Hashem created the sun. It rises, it sets. It has no choice. There's no off switch. It can't do anything but listen to the Ribono Shel Olam. So you're saying, I should follow the Torah every day like heaven and earth? I don't know. If I was at a Musar Shmuz, and the Menahel got up, the Mashgiach got up, and he said, you're tired? You're not in the mood of learning today? What do you mean? The sun got up today. Come on. That talks to you? That means something to you? I should be like the sun. Shkoyach. Come every day to yeshiva like the chair. The chair is here every day, so I should come here every day. Yeah, that's good for the chair, but I'm not a chair. So what does this mean? Why do Chazal continue throughout their dozens and dozens of Chazal? Leichel nemala otzel. Go to the ant. Learn from the ant. Yeah, learn from the ant. That means something? Rabbi Chanan quotes an amazing Zohar. Rabbi Chanan brings out a certain point, but I think we could bring out another point as well. When the Rebbeinu Shalom created Adam, when the Rebbeinu Shalom created man, so the pasuk says, Nasa Adam. Let us make man. Rashi's brother. Who's us? Who's Rebbeinu Shalom talking to? He says, let us make man. Who's Hashem discussing this with? Rashi says, Yesh lemin makoim litois. Chas Hashem, you can make a mistake. Who's the Rebbeinu Shalom talking to? So Rashi says the truth is it's a little bit misleading, but it's kedai to write it this way to teach the anivos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You learn out that a superior should always ask the advice of people beneath him. The Zohar says a different shot. You know what the Zohar says on this pasuk? On the first day, the Rebbeinu Shalom created light and darkness. On the second day, the Rebbeinu Shalom created the Shamayim. Then the Rebbeinu Shalom created the Aretz. Then Hashem created trees. Then Hashem created the sun and the moon and all the animals and the lions and the deer and the leopard and the eagle. And every creation has a force, has a power, has a tchuna, has a talent, has an ability. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom created fish. He created birds. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom made a big meeting. And the Rebbeinu Shalom called in the sun. And he called in the moon. And he called in the stars. And he called in the fish. And the birds. And the lion. And the leopard. And the eagle. And he says, I created this world with innumerable amounts of ability and talent and koichos. I want everyone here to now put your koyach into the pot. Naaseh Adam. Now let's make man. So what is man? So Chanan says man is a dangerous being. Man is like a lion and a tiger and a bear. And the thing is, Rabbi Chanan says, there's limited damage a lion could do because a lion doesn't have seichel. And sometimes a lion is chained down. But if you take a lion and a bear and a tiger and you give it seichel, there's no end to what kind of destruction this entity could do. And we know from history. We know there were Shiurim in history that were able to commit such disastrous effects throughout the world. Because what is man? Man is the composite of the whole world plus seichel. That's why Rabbi Chanan says, Koheles ends, Soif davar hakol nishma. You see, if you have a lion, you could put it behind bars. But what if you had a lion who's a tiger, who's a bear, who's every chaya ra in the world? What kind of chain would you need to tie down this creature? Only one thing. Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Shamayim is the one thing that holds this Adam back from terrible disaster. That's why Shlomo HaMelech says, Soif davar hakol nishma. At the end of the day, when everything is heard, as haloikim yirah, fear the Rebbeinu Shalom. Kizek kol ha'adam. That's the entirety of man. Man is nothing without Yiras Shamayim. That's one way to look at it. But there's another way to look at this. When you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, what could I do with myself? What could I be? What could I become? What could I accomplish in this world? What could I do for myself, for my family, for Klal Yisrael, for the Ribono Shel Olam? Sometimes a person thinks, Ma'ani, what am I? There are 10 guys in the Shiur who are smarter than me. There are 50 guys in the Shiur smarter than me. What am I? What can I do with my life? But the answer is, you know how great you could be? You know what your potential is? You know what your ability is? Infinite. It's infinite. Really? I don't have any strength. Yeah, you do. You have the gevura of a Ari in you. You have the power, you have the boldness of a nomer. You have the swiftness of an eagle. It's all in you. It's in your neshama. It's in your psyche. It's in your personality. You have infinite ability. There's no end. It's limitless. What you could do, what you could be, and what you could accomplish. It's one problem. How do I access it? What's the key? I didn't know I have all this ability because it must be really bottled up because I'm not seeing it. I get up in the morning and I'm thinking, what am I going to do today? Do I even want to get up? I'm sitting in the yeshiva. What am I doing? What are you doing? The whole world is at your beck and call. You could accomplish anything. But how do you access it? Comes the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon says there are different kind of mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs are bein adam lechaveroi. Some mitzvahs are bein adam lamakoim. And then there's a mitzvah bein adam la'atzmai. Bein adam la'atzmai. You're over here. How do you reach the shamayim? How do you reach the highest heights? How do you access? Man is an olam katan. Man has within them the entire bria. If you ever think, I learned yesterday, I learned the day before, I learned the day before that, again, Nachamal, I'm going to come to the yeshiva. Nachamal. You have the consistency of the sun in you. Day in, day out. Day in, day out. Don't let the Yetzer Hara say, oh, you already did that already. I'm worn out. No. You have within you. The Rebbe Shem is not telling you a far out fact. Look at the sun. Look at the moon. You have in you the koyach of consistency of shamayim va'aretz. Comes the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon says there's a mitzvah bein adam la'atzmai. What does Vilna Gaon mean that the Gemara says me'ikara ki avid inish adaita denavshei avid? The Gaon is learning the word me'ikara doesn't mean in the beginning. What does me'ikara mean? Fundamentally. Me'ikar. Fundamentally. Fundamentally, why does a person learn? You're learning ksubis. Yeah? You know how many prakim are in ksubis? How many prakim are in ksubis? 13 prakim. Why? You know the Rebbe Reb Shmelka. I was just at the kever of the Rebbe Reb Shmelka. The Rebbe Reb Shmelka said, by the way, that there's no way to be mechadesh anything in Torah unless you're mechavein bekavana atzuma in Berchas HaTorah and Ahava Rabbah or Ava Soilam. The Rebbe Reb Shmelka says Shas is a ksubis is Shas Katan, yeah? So since it's Shas Katan, and Shas is built on Yud Gimel Midah Shatarnid Rashas Bahem, so therefore there are 13 prakim and ksubis. That's why the Rebbe says, Chazal say you're never supposed to start a sentence with the word af. Whoever starts with the word af doesn't have a good ending. First the Nachash. She says af, Amar Alekim, the Nachash didn't have a good ending. Who else? Haman. Af lahivia Esther? No. Who else? Sar ha'oifim. Af bachaloimi. Sar ha'oifim didn't have a good ending. Who else? Kairach. Af el eretz zavas. Don't start with af. So the Rebbe Shmelka asks, but we have fifth perek. Perek af alpi. How can you start with af? So the Rebbe Shmelka says, because the fifth perek is keneged the fifth of the Midos Harachamim. The fifth of the Midos Harachamim is Erech Apayim. Apayim. It's Mevatel Af. So if you have a bad temper, you should learn Perek Afalpi. That's a Stamazai. You're learning Ksubas. How can you not? Where are you up to? All over. You're holding the whole Masechta. Rabbeinu Yoina in the Shar Gimel talks about the various levels of mitzvahs. talks about the Rabbanans. He talks about Lavim. He talks about Asay. He talks about Lav Sheish Baikares. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, you might say that a mitzvah saseh is very weak. A mitzvah saseh maybe is not as important as a lav, for instance. A lav, if you violate a lav, you're chayiv malchus. If you violate an aseh, you're not chayiv malchus. The Gemara even says if somebody does tshuva, you don't need Yom Kippur, you don't need Yisurim, eino izos mikan ad shemochan lo miyad. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, but don't make a mistake. Rabbeinu Yonah says, the mailos ho'elyonos nimseru b'mitzvahs aseh. Mailos elyonos. What does that mean? What are examples of mailos elyonos? So I'm going to skip the first maila of Rabbeinu Yonah, and I'm going to come back to it. Mailos elyonos, says Rabbeinu Yonah. Number 2, malos Talmud Torah. Number 3, mailos leches b'darchei Hashem, the mitzvah of chesed. Malosh shleimus habitachin, hisboinenus begedulas Hashem. Rabbeinu Yonah talks about malos hakadusha, malos hayira, malos ha'ahava, malos hadveikus. Meaning Rabbeinu Yonah is saying, you know how choshev a mitzvah saseh is? Don't make a mistake. A mitzvah saseh, it's not just, okay, you think shaking a lulav and esrog. Okay, that's just a quick mitzvah masiyos. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, there are entire realms of accomplishment in avodas Hashem called mailos ha'olyonos, kedusha, bitachon, ahava, yira, Talmud Torah. And then I skipped the first one. I'm going to come back to the first one. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, you know what the first mailos ha'olyonos is? Says Rabbeinu Yonah, malos habechira. Malas habachira? What does that mean? Malas habachira. Bechira is not even a mitzvah. You could look in the Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvahs. The Rambam doesn't list bechira as a mitzvah. What kind of mitzvah is that? If I have an Nisayon, whether to do a mitzvah or not, I have to do the mitzvah. But when I do the mitzvah, I'm not mekayim a mitzvah of bechira. What's Rabbeinu Yonah saying? Malas habachira? Bechira is not a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah. Bechira is a yisoid in emunah. We believe the Rebbeinu Shalom controls the whole world except our decisions. He lets us choose. What does Rabbeinu Yonah mean? Malas habechira. Ramat Yisrael Solomon, Zechatzak Vracha, in his Perush on Rabbeinu Yonah, says, L'chayra eich shayches malas b'mitzvahs u'b'charta b'chaim. What does Rabbeinu Yonah mean? They're madregos in bechira. What does Rabbeinu Yonah mean that it's a maila? What does he mean it's an asay? What's Rabbeinu Yonah saying? You ever wonder about that? They learn Shari Tshuva, right? There's a Musar say there, no? Shar Gimel. Rabbeinu Yonah. And I would add, okay, if I were to ask you, okay, even though it says in Perkei Avos, Hevezar b'mitzvah kala kev'chamura shiyato yodea matan schar shel mitzvahs, but there are mitzvahs that we could say maybe are more important than others. For example, what would you say is the most important mitzvah in the Torah? Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. What would you say is the number 2 most important mitzvah? I saw many places in the writings of the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim writes, the 2 most important mitzvahs in the Torah, Talmud Torah, Gemilas Chasadim. Chafetz Chaim writes this in many places. One raya the Chafetz Chaim brings us from the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara says that children entered the Beis HaMedrash. They said a chiddush that from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, nobody said such a chiddush. They said, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. Aleph, Beis, Aleph, Bina. Learn Torah. Gimel, Daled, Gimel, Dalim. Says the Chafetz Chaim, if there is a drasha, learn Torah, and do chesed from the beginning of the Aleph, Beis, from here we learn these are the 2 most important mitzvahs in the Torah. And the Chafetz Chaim brings many rayas to this. So if I were making a list of all the malos ha'elyonos in a mitzvah saseh, I would have kept Rabbeinu Yonah's order, because mitzvah number 2 is Talmud Torah, mitzvah number 3 is Gemilas Chasadim. But what does Rabbeinu Yonah mean? Mitzvah number 1 is the mitzvah of Bechira. I had a very interesting question. I was thinking about this question for a long time. There's a Tana D'Belio. Tana D'Belio says, Chayiv Adam Loimar. You know what I'm about to say? Masai, Yagia, Masai, Lamasei, Avoisai, Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov. Tana D'Belio Perek Chafei. A person is obligated to say, when will I reach the Madrega of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? You ever hear that, Chazal? Person is obligated to say. Now, at first, if you ever learned the Sefer Or HaTzafon is from the Alter of Slabodka. He's medayek in the extent of the words that Chazal use. I'll give you an example. Does the Gemara say you're chayiv to be maver sedra? Are you chayiv? You're chayiv. It's in Shulchan Aruch, Reish Pei Hei. The Shulchan Aruch says chayiv Adam, lahashlam Parsha Tzibor. Does the Gemara say chayiv? The lashon of the Gemara is la'olam yisader Adam Parsha Tzibor. Why doesn't the Gemara say chayiv? Because if the Gemara says la'olam, if Chazal say la'olam, it means chayiv. But they didn't even say. Imagine if they would have said chayiv. You hear? The Gemara says la'olam. The Torah says tzarech. The Shulchan Aruch says chayiv. That's how Chazal speak. La'olam means chayiv. They don't have to say the word chayiv. The Beis Yosef understands if the Gemara says la'olam, it means chayiv. So imagine if Chazal say the word chayiv. Imagine how important it has to be. Chazal say chayiv Adam loimar masai yagiu masai lamasei avoisai Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov. You're obligated to say, not when am I going to become the Gadol Hadar, not when am I going to become an Achroin, not when am I going to become a Rishon. When am I going to reach the Madrega of Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov? Chayiv? So I have one simple question. V'shteit. Where does it say this? Where in the Torah does it say? The Tana D'Belio is mechadesh this. Ein navi rashoy lechadesh davar. Where in the Chumash does it say chayiv adam loimar masai yagiu masai lamasei avoisai Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov? The Rambam doesn't even talk about this. Not even a mitzvah. Rabbi Yerucham has an amazing piece. Rabbi Yerucham says, how do we account for the difference between Nevi'im, Tanoim, Amoraim, Go'ainim, Rishonim, Achroinim? What was it about Rishonim that they're greater than Achroinim? You ever wonder about that? What is it about them? Were they smarter? Did they have more Yer Shamayim? What's the Nakuda? What's the Nakuda that as the Tkufais go on, so there's Yeridas Hadaris? What exactly is the Nakuda? We don't have as much Chachma, we don't have as much Hasmada, we don't have as much as Emuna. What's the Nakuda? Rabbi Yerucham says a word, I don't think you'll ever see this word anywhere else. Rabbi Yerucham says the main Nakuda between a Rashi and a Rashba and an Achroin is the word Yazama. Yazama. What does that mean? Rabbi Yerucham says the word Yazama means ambition. Ambition. That Rashi and the Rambam and the Rosh and the Rif, they got up in the morning and they aspired to be greater than in the times of the Achroinim, where their ambition was not as great. That is the Iker Nakuda, Rabbi Yerucham says. Between Rishonim and Achroinim, between Go'onim and Rishonim, between Amoraim and Go'onim. Yazama, ambition. Rabbi Yerucham says it's not only by Torah. You could look around the world. Who are the most successful people in any field? It's not the people who are smartest. It's not the people who are the most talented. It's not any specific ingredient. This is the key ingredient. Yazama. What is their ambition? If they dream big, they'll be successful. If they have small dreams, they won't be as successful. This, says Rabbi Yerucham, in a nutshell, if you could boil it down to one nakuda, obviously there are many factors, many considerations, and many other points. This is the nakuda, says Rabbi Yerucham. Says Rabbi Yerucham, this is the great mitzvah of Chayiv Adam Loimar. Masai Yagiu, Masai Lamasai Avoisai Avraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov. So if you wanted to know, when you come into yeshiva, what's the first thing you need to do? So some people would say the first thing is you have to open up the book. You have to open up the Gemara. No. Keep it closed for a minute. Even before you open it up. The first thing you need to do is put the Gemara down and walk over to the entire shelf. And you need to say, I want to know the whole thing. With Rashi and Tosfos and the Marsha, the Rosh, the Rif, the Rambam, the Torah Shulchan Aruch, and all the Achronim. And then you need to walk over to the Mishnah and say, I want to know that also. And to all Chav Dalet Svarim, and all to the Sifrei Musar. That's the first thing. Now you could open up the Sefer. As they say, that's Daf Aleph. That's Daf Aleph. Before you learn, you need to want to. So a Bachar once came to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. He said, give me a bracha, I should become a Talmid Chacham. Rabbi Chaim said, I can't give you a bracha to become a Talmid Chacham. That's up to you. So the Bachar said, give me a bracha, I should want to become a Talmid Chacham. Chaim said, I can't give you a bracha for that either. That's also up to you. That's your bechira. You need to want it. So the Bachar says, give me a bracha, I should want to become a Talmid Chacham. Reb Chaim smiled, he said, that I could taka give you a bracha for. You know which mitzvah this is? I would say it's the first mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah that many are not even aware that it exists. But it's the mitzvah that Rabbeinu Yoina says and lists as the first of the Mailas HaElyonos. The mitzvah of Ubacharta B'chayim. How do I know that? Because Hashem led me. Rabbeinu Yoina wrote another sefer. It's called Sharei HaAvodah. You ever hear the sefer Sharei HaAvodah? Rabbeinu Yoina wrote Sharei Tshuva. Rabbeinu Yoina wrote Sharei HaAvodah. At the end of Sharei HaAvodah, Rabbeinu Yoina says, I'll read to you. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, Uv'chol yoim v'yoim yoisif oimetz. Every day strengthen yourself. Lehischazek v'lalois mimida lamida. To rise up from one level to the next. Mimadrega lamadrega. V'yachmoid. You need to desire. V'yichsoif. You need to yearn. Lahasig ba'avoida masha'ein yadai maseges. Don't make a mistake. I should only yearn for something I could do. No, yearn for something you can't do. Can you imagine? Rabbeinu Yoina says, yearn for something you're not able to get. Rabbeinu Yoina says, those who have achieved it, be mechazik them, be friends with them, learn from them. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, v'al ha-bechira bilvad yikabel schar. For bechira alone you'll be rewarded. You want it? That's your goal? You're choosing it? That's your ambition? You go up to Shamayim? You got it. It's yours. You'll be rewarded as if you got it. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, Ki ha-bechira mitzvahs aseh shenemar ubacharta b'chayim. And then Rabbeinu Yoina says, if you really want it, oid yatzal lanu mitzvahs ha-bechira. Ki mitoch sheyivchar b'midahi. You chose it, you aspire to it, Hashem yazer oisai b'ma she'ein yativa yichol lahaseg. The Rebbe Hashem will help you to achieve what you're not even able to achieve. You know how important this mitzvah is? It's not just a Ma'ilo Ha'elyoina. I would say, if you look carefully in the Shari Tshuva, and you look at the listing in Rabbeinu Yoina, number 3, Gemilas Chasadim. Number 2, Talmud Torah. Number 1, Ubacharta B'chayim. That's the Hakdama to all Avodas Hashem. Now I would say we know where Chazal got. Chayiv Adam Loimar. Masai Yagiu Masai Lamasai Avoisai Avraham Yitzchak V'Yakov. How does the Tanit B'Elyahu know this? How does the Tanit B'Elyahu know that it's a chiyuv? Because it's a pasuk in Chumash. Ubacharta b'chayim. You know, sometimes we underestimate our own value. We underestimate what we could do. I know in the yeshiva they daven nusach sfard. Ahavas oilam ahavtanu Hashem lekeinu. By the way, nusach Ashkenaz says ahava rabba. One of the reasons the Ari made the nusach ahavas oilam ahavtanu, one of the reasons, because the Rashi Tevos Aleph Ayin Aleph ahavas oilam ahavtanu is gematria 72, and this is a bracha. It's a berachas haTorah, and the Rebbe Shem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael with the Shem Ayin Beis. Hineni ba elecha be'av he'anan. That's why Parsha Yisrael has 72 psukim. You know, in Keladain, the Gra says it has 10 words. Keneged Aseres HaDebros, 72 words, Keneged the Shem Ayin Beis, 12 words, Keneged the 12 Shvatim. The Rebbe Shem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael with the Shem Ayin Beis. So to Miramis to that, the Ari says, the Nusach is, Ahavas Oilam Ahavtanu. But Nusach Ashkenaz says, Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu. Klal Yisrael has been saying that for 1,000 years, from the times of the Balei HaTosfos. Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu. Teach the words, Ahava Rabba Havtanu. What does Rabba mean? You could look in the English translation. Ahava Rabba Havtanu. Ahava Rabba Havtanu means, literally, with a great love, the Rebbe Shem has loved us. Reb Schwab writes that's not a correct translation. Ahava Rabba does not mean great. Ahava Rabba means expanding. Expanding. Says Reb Schwab, the Rebbe Shem loves Klal Yisrael, Avada. Who does the Rebbe Shem love more? You? Your Eltazedas? Achroinim? Rishonim? So, I don't know. Hashem loves Koimas Klal Yisrael. Reb Shab says, no, not Pasha. The love of the Rebbe Shem for Klal Yisrael is an expanding love. As much as Hashem loved the Dar HaMidbar, Hashem loved Klal Yisrael sometimes in the Nevi'im more, in the times of the Go'inim more, in the times of Rishonim more, times of Achroinim more, and He loves you more than anyone in history. Why? Why? Now that's a shocker. Who would have thought that? Me? What am I? Ma'ani, ma'chayai. Kol hagiborim ka'ayin lefanecha. You know, the Ari would always tell Reb Chaim Vital, you're so great, you're greater than Tanoim. Reb Chaim Vital, you know that? The Ari would tell Reb Chaim Vital, you're greater than Tanoim. So one time Reb Chaim Vital said, Rebbe, stop telling me that. You also told me I don't even come to the toenails of the Rishonim. So Arizal says like this, the way Hashem judges a person is based on the times that we live in. Says the Ari, here in Sfas, compared to the earlier generations, the koichos hatuma are so out of control here that the nisyonos are so great that you are greater even than the Tanoim. I have a hard time understanding that. The koichos hatuma were so great 500 years ago in Sfas. So then what would the Arizal say to us? If the Arizal said to Reb Chaim Vital that because the Koiches Hatum were so great, the Reb Chaim Vital is on a pedestal higher than the Tanoim, what would the Ari say if he came into this yeshiva today? I don't know. I'm afraid to say what I'm thinking. But it's a good thing I don't have to say it, because Rabbi Yerucham writes it. Rabbi Yerucham says, and he says we don't like to talk about it too much. That's why I don't come every day, just once in a while. Rabbi Yerucham writes, you could have a bacher learning a Rashba, he says. And in Shamayim, the bacher doesn't really understand what the Rashba meant. But in Shamayim, the bacher, I couldn't even say this. Rabbi Yerucham writes it. I believe in Parsha Shlach. The bacher is held on a higher pedestal than the Rishon whose words he's learning. In the new editions of Rabbi Yerucham, it prints in parentheses, don't get nervous. This is already found in the Kisei Arizal from what I just told you. So when you get up in the morning, you have to think to yourself, Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu Hashem Elokeinu. I have within me endless capacity, endless ability, endless talent. The entire world is within me. And when I come to the yeshiva and I learn Masechta Ksubis, I'm unlocking a force and a power that there is nothing in this entire universe that could compare to it. Because it's not just the rising of the sun I'm unlocking. It's not just a star I'm unlocking. I'm unlocking Kol Ha'olam Kulai. I'll end with a story. You have the zchus to hear from my father. You know that my father, Rabbi Glatstein, his father, Rabbi Rabbi Glatstein Zechatzak Levracha, was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was a ben bayis by Rabbi Nachum Zemba. He was very close to many Gedolim in pre-war Europe. He had smicha from Rabbi Shlomo David Kahana. Rabbi Shlomo David Kahana was the Rav of Varsha. And he was Moiser Nefesh during the Holocaust to be Mekayim mitzvahs tefillin. He risked his life to be Mekayim mitzvahs, to make minyanim. And after the war, after liberation, my grandfather was made the head of the religious department of the Joint Distribution Committee. So as a survivor, he happened to know English. He worked for the American Army, and in that capacity, he brought over for the survivors Tashmishay Mitzvah, Tashmishay Kedusha. He built mikvahs, he built yeshivas in the DP camps. In the DP camps, he met a great Goin. Maybe in the Olam HaYeshivas, you might not be familiar with him. He's with Bershus of the Rosh Shiva. His name was Rav Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog. He wrote Shailas Utshuvas Heichal Yitzchak. He was a Goin Otzum. Actually, just if you want to know, the Radzina Rebbe tried to reinstate the Tchelas, and Rav Herzog, and the Radzina Rebbe was, according to most, did not come to correct Tchelas, and Rav Herzog also had an approach to try to rediscover. He was one of the important personalities after the Milchama. After the Milchama, he went to the Pope. He had with him a list of 10,000 boys and girls who, during the Holocaust, their families gave them over to churches, to monasteries, to galachim, to save their lives, because the parents knew the Germans were coming. They were going to wipe out the whole mishpacha. So what could a parent do? Rav Herzog had with him the list of 10,000 boys and girls that Yidden had to give over, and Nebuch, they were shmazach, they were converted. And Rav Herzog says to the Pope, here's my list, I have every child's name. When I used to be a Rav in Queens many years ago, I was close to an old Talmud Chacham who was a Talmud Muvak of Rabbi Lezer Silver. You heard Rabbi Lezer Silver? Rabbi Lezer Silver was also a goy notzim. He was a Talmud of the Rugged Shaber. It's well known, Rabbi Lezer Silver used to go into the churches and the monasteries, and he would cry out, Shema Yisrael, and a little kid was stirred, and he came running to Rabbi Lezer Silver, and he would rescue them. So Rav Herzog says, look, I have with me the names, the addresses of these children. Give them back. Give them back to us. You stole them. We only gave away our kinderlach because we thought we would never survive. Give us back the children. And the Pope looks at Rav Herzog in the eye, and he says, sorry, they've all been converted. The law is, once a child is converted, they can never be returned to another religion, and the door was slammed in Rav Herzog's face. Rav Herzog would come to America, and he would go to various yeshivas, and this is the early 50s. And he went to Skokie Yeshiva, other yeshivas, and he would speak for Bachram. And he would always say, I have the list of 10,000 boys and girls who Nebuch have been lost forever. But he would tell B'nai Torah, he says, you're from Miyuta to Miyuta. In the history of Klal Yisrael, throughout the Doros, we were in Mitzrayim. 80% of Klal Yisrael were lost forever in Mitzrayim. And then Bayis Rishon, over 1 million Yidden were killed. And then Bayis Sheni. And crusades, and inquisition, and pogroms, and the Holocaust. For a Jew, for a Yid, to be learning Torah today, it's not highly improbable. It's not statistically unlikely. It's downright impossible. You all know what Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes. Rabbi Yaakov Emden says, Ki behisboineni b'nefloi seila. When I contemplate the miracle of the eternity of Klal Yisrael, Godloi etzli yoiser mikol hanisim sha'asa kadosh baruch hu b'Mitzrayim. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, I'm not writing this. He says, Chai nafshi, I swear. He says, I swear that to look in a yeshiva at the face of a Yid, it's a greater miracle than Kriyas Yamsuf. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes. And you were Zoicha to be that miracle. 99.9% of Klal Yisrael was not Zoicha. So you have a job in this world. And Rav Herzog would say, if you're still around, and you have the zechus to be learning Torah, what are you going to do for Klal Yisrael? What are you going to do for the Ribono Shel Olam? So whatever you choose to do with your life, Klal Yisrael needs Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshiva. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to be a lay leader, you're going to be in business, whatever you choose to do with your life. But you have to ask yourself, you are Zoicha to be the greatest miracle in the history of the world. Greater than Kriyas Yamsuf. What am I going to do with the koichos Ribono Shel Olam gave me? And those koichos are infinite. Those koichos are endless. Those koichos are immeasurable. That's the first mitzvah in the Torah. The first mitzvah in the Torah, Ubacharta b'chayim, l'man yichya ata v'zarecha. So when you come to the yeshiva and you learn Torah, you're upholding the entire world. But me'ikara, fundamentally, ki avid inish, when a person learns, adaite denafshe avid. You're doing it so you could become who you are able to become. It's a great zechus to be with you this afternoon. Thank you very much. Bracha v'hatzlacha.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.